Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of The Conscious Capitalists with myself, Timothy Henry, and my partner in making the world a better place through business, Raj Sisodia. Hi there, Raj.
Hi, Timothy. Good to see you again.
Good to see you. You know, I was thinking it would probably be best if you were the person who introduced our guest this week.
Okay, we have a very special guest today. There's none other than Timothy Henry, who you all know and love. Timothy has been a friend now since, 2007. So do the math. What is that? 13 plus 4, 17 years. We first met in Boston when I was giving a talk on my book, Firms of Endearment, which had just come out that year. And it was somewhere downtown Boston. And then later on, he and I met for lunch. And then I invited him to this gathering at John Mackey's ranch, which was happening in a few months, to talk about conscious capitalism and potentially starting a movement. So that was February of 2008 when we all gathered at John's ranch, Timothy. Those 3 or 4, long retreat, actually, about 4 days maybe. But was really an amazing experience with a group of very interesting people, at the end of which we made the fateful decision that let's try to launch something. let's put on a show, and yeah, so that was the beginning, and I think we've come a long way in these years.
Yeah, we have, and sometimes people ask, we've come a long way. How is it? And I sort of go, on the one hand, remember, Raj, when we were talking about purpose and stakeholders in 2008. People were like, well, what are you talking about? It's like you have two heads. So on the one hand, it's amazing because nowadays purpose and stakeholders are part of the business vernacular and it's around us everywhere. So it's become common business language. But back then it wasn't. On the other hand, we probably thought we were going to move a lot faster in terms of the impact we were going to have on the world. And it's still, probably even more now than ever. There's this need for conscious capitalism. So it's, when you look back over 17 years, you sort of go, wow, we've come a long way. And on the other hand, boy, we have so much further to go.
Yes, and I think that is true anytime you try to do something significant, right, in the world. You're never, in our lifetime, you're not going to get there fully, ever. I think the larger the challenge. And so to try to change the whole story of business and capitalism, that's a big undertaking, right?
Fools that we are, right? Fools that we are. But on the other hand, Raj, I had the privilege this week of being up in Saginaw, Michigan, with our Great Lakes Bay region chapter of Conscious Capitalism.
Yeah.
And it was an amazing experience. I actually, at the end, they asked me to go up and say a few words. And I got up and I looked around the room and there were over 200 people. And they just had an amazing panel of really conscious leaders that was very impressive. And I said to them, 17 years ago, maybe we imagined that there would be a group in Saginaw, Michigan with 200, really important members of the community up in that area in an event like this, but I'm not quite sure. So it's amazing how it's spread in some ways, and yet.
Yeah, I know, and I've been to that chapter a couple of times. They put on great events. They've got a lot of. It's a very vibrant community of people that are. So we know that these ideas are important. We know that they impact people. We know that they shift the trajectories of people's lives. And so for us, I think the motivation is just that, right? We know this is the right thing to do. And it was always necessary. We were kind of born out of a crisis, although it was somewhat coincidental that the financial crisis happened just when we had our first event. It was not connected to that. This movement was not inspired by that crisis, but that crisis did illustrate some of the consequences of unconscious, lower consciousness capitalism. I think it wiped out $38 trillion worth of wealth. It was a good reminder that businesses can create, but they can also destroy a lot of wealth of multiple kinds. right? So I think that was, we were kind of born in that fire in a way. And yeah, it's grown. I think it's taken us all over the world, from Australia to New Zealand to Israel to Brazil to Colombia to Chile to Costa Rica to Panama to Spain, Portugal, and many other places, So, yeah, it's been gratifying. And what is also gratifying now for us in the movement is that you have agreed to take over as CEO now of this movement. Is it official yet? What's the first day?
Oh yeah, no, it's official. I'm 2.5 weeks into the new role.
So yeah, we were all delighted when you put your hat in the ring and were willing to do this. It's not an easy job, but it's an important job. And of course, you've been on the board for most of this time, and you've been one of the founders, so you know intimately the story of our 15 to 17 years, and then what needs to happen at this time. So tell me, I mean, you've got a lot that you could be doing in the world, and you are doing as a very successful consultant. What intrigued you about this opportunity? Why did you think you finally want to do this? Because we've had multiple CEOs before, and I don't remember you putting your hat in the ring during those times.
It's our baby in some ways, right? We helped to birth this movement, and we birthed it with some real high ideals of what it could be. And as we talked about earlier, in many ways, it's spread all over the world. And yet, I have a sense that, one, the need for conscious capitalism has never been greater. Whatever side of the political spectrum you sit on, one thing we can all agree on is we need more good jobs. And we need to create these kind of conscious businesses where leaders have this increased level of consciousness. So at one level, I look and I sort of go, the need is greater than ever. And, I still have a little bit of that Pounders vision of what it could be and what we haven't quite gotten to yet as a movement. So for me, that opportunity to, in a sense, reimagine what conscious capitalism can be now, 17 years later, is an incredible privilege, is the way I look at it. And so I'm looking at it as sort of like, oh my gosh, this is sort of almost a sacred calling. If not now, when? If not me, then whom? And I have this sense that for me personally, this is me living my purpose. And I have a unique position that I can give to the movement, a perspective and maybe a credibility and a momentum that right now we need. So I feel, blessed to have this opportunity and really super motivated to try to help us all move the movement.
Move the movement. I like that phrasing. Yeah, and I think, anytime there's a leadership transition, it's an opportunity for a reboot, a reset, sort of looking at it with fresh eyes again. It's easy to be incremental and just keep doing a little more of what we did last year. But I think what this moment looks like it's going to be, with your vision, is to step back and really look at, if we were starting today, what would we be doing, right? And what would we not be doing? And how can we accelerate the impact that we want to have? We've had impact, as you said. We've definitely changed lives through the movement, through our events, through the book, through many other things. But our ambitions are much higher, and the uncharted territory out there is much larger than what we've covered. And so talk to me a little bit about how you are seeing the path forward and your vision for what is possible, in what time frame, and then we can talk about some of the steps that you plan to take.
Well, thanks for that question, Raj. It's we step back and at one level, at the very highest level, I say, as we think about reimagining the movement, we need to step back and remember to celebrate and yet elevate capitalism. And the celebrate is to acknowledge the incredible things that have happened over the last 200 years in terms of the progress of humanity. And at the same time, to understand that there's been a shadow side as well. There are some side effects. there are some negative externalities that are as a result of this. So as we move forward, there's this moment in time where we can start to elevate the practice of conscious capitalism. How do we elevate the practice of conscious capitalism? Through conscious leadership and conscious businesses. And that's the core of what we need to do, is how do we unlock that practice of capitalism through more conscious leadership and conscious businesses. And as a movement, what we have to do is two things as an organization that's at the head of the movement is, one, we have to help everybody understand how conscious capitalism can be relevant to their business. So too often there are people for whom this immediately resonates, which is wonderful. Then there's others who say, well, that's a nice idea, but I don't know if we could do it. I don't know if it's, and so part of what we need to do is help people understand how they can make it relevant to their business. And then when they come into contact with the conscious capitalism organization, we can help them accelerate the practice of conscious capitalism. So we have to be able to make it relevant, and then we have to be able to help accelerate the practice of conscious capitalism. And if we do those things, then we will indeed elevate the overall practice of capitalism.
What we have to offer people is not just something that's relevant, but something that carries so much power within it, right? I mean, you can unlock the real potential of your business by connecting to a higher purpose, right? I mean, that just elevates what you do and the impact that you can have. Likewise, when you adopt a stakeholder mindset, right? Each of these is a powerful source of great impact, positive impact for the business. Change your approach to leadership. You start focusing on creating a trusting and caring culture. You do each of those, it makes a big difference. Anyway, if you do just one of those, it will change your business. But if you do all of them, then the impact can be quite dramatic, as we have seen, countless times. There's kind of a multiplier effect between those pillars, and that's why we've seen some of the numbers that we have seen in terms of outperformance of some of the companies that do this well, right? I mean, remember, conscious businesses are all on a spectrum. There's no perfectly conscious business on this planet, just like there's no perfectly conscious human. But the more you are on that side of the spectrum, you can see the consequences. So I think there's a lot, the potential that exists in this way of being is pretty extraordinary. And we just have to get over that. People have to unlearn some mental models, right? We were all taught certain things in business school. Yeah. And we are running counter to many of the why, what, who, and how of business. We have different answers than we were taught. And that's always a challenge, right?
Well, Raj, it's always fascinating because on the one hand, some of these things are almost commonsensical, right? If you sort of said, do you want your children to work in an organization where the work has no meaning, they work 9 to 5, they don't like the people don't like them, they don't feel they're paid well, or do you want your children or your nieces and nephews, your grandchildren to work in organizations where they have meaning and they want to go to work in the morning and they feel the people care about them and that they can make a difference and they feel they're paid a fair wage at the end of the day? And then you stop and you say, which would I want for my children? 1, and 2, which do I think would be a more productive business environment? Where do you think you're going to get more innovation? Where do you think you're going to get better performance from your people? And when you put it that way, it's like commonsensical. And yet, it's common sense, but not so common. And, that's what our movement is in essence all about is how do we create those kind of organizations that are high performance organizations because they bring out the best in the people. And, it's always astounding at one level that when you put it in fairly simple terms, nobody argues with you, but then they'll say, but not here. It's hard here because...
No, there is no legitimate case against this, I mean, it sounds a little arrogant, I suppose, for us to say that, but I've yet to see. And, if you look at all the parallel movements that have sprung up or have moved alongside us, from CSR and now ESG and then B Corps and B Team and inclusive capitalism and just capital and shared value and all of those. I think that what conscious capitalism offers is a superset of all of them. In other words, everything is subsumed within this. All right. If you adopt these pillars, then you're going to actually address all of those, including having a great place to work and having a positive impact on the lives of your customers and uplifting your communities and regenerating the environment and all of that. So I think this is it's a powerful combination of ideas that has the potential to move us off of where we've been. And I think we just have to break that inertia of where people are stuck in a mental model.
Yeah, and I also think, we also have to be careful that, it's conscious capitalism. And in that sense, what I mean is, an organization has to have a good business model and it has to have a good strategy. And if it has those things, the conscious capitalism tenets help it go from being, a good business to being an outstanding, great business. And, and that's the difference. Conscious capital is not going to save you if you don't have those fundamentals. And you still have to run a good business, but the difference between a good business and a really outstanding, high performance, great business are these tenets.
Right. I think that's an important point. And our friend Richard Barrett makes that well, right? He talks about full spectrum consciousness. And he has 7 levels of consciousness in his model when it applies to consciousness. But basically, it says when you elevate your consciousness, you don't forget the lower levels, the so-called lower levels. I mean, that's, we shouldn't put them in a hierarchy necessarily. But the fundamentals, the basics of business, right? Efficiency and processes and accountability and, as you said, a sound business model and so forth. All of those are necessary ingredients. We're saying those are not sufficient in the future, that you can do so much more. It's like an analogy I've used in the past is a train with 2 engines, right? You've got the traditional business engine, business model, strategy, et cetera, and now you add this engine of consciousness. This train is going to go much further, much faster, and it'll navigate hilly terrains and difficult times with greater ease if you can do that. So this really turbocharges the business and makes it much more resilient. I think that's the other one. When we have these pandemics or financial crises or other kinds of external factors, many companies are revealed in those instances to be extremely fragile, not have the capacity to ride through those kinds of things, whereas conscious companies would. They wouldn't have that. For example, the big 3 airlines would have gone bankrupt within weeks when the pandemic hit. Because they had no, resiliency, and they had the very big balance sheets. They had taken on massive debt. They had bought back their own shares. I mean, they did all the, the Jack Welch kind of stuff, when times are good, but they had not prepared or planned for the inevitable difficult times. And that's a big part of the responsibility of a company and its leadership, to make sure that you can ride through these storms, right?
Well, and, as you and I have spoken before, we now have, AI coming, and it is going to impact the workplace, and it is going to impact how businesses operate. Do we fully understand how? No. But that resilience and adaptive capability of an organization to quickly understand what both the threats and the opportunities are is going to be accelerated. And that's the one thing we know about AI, that it will have an impact. We just don't know how. So do you want to have a resilient, adaptive organization going into this, or do you want to have a low trust, low engagement environment where the organization's fragile and it's held together by fear and by some charismatic leader who sort of like orders everybody into shape? At some point, that just doesn't work anymore. And we know that. So again, back to this sort of almost commonsensical discussion that was like, which organization would you rather be a part of or invest in?
Yeah, and you mentioned fear. I find that too many business decisions are rooted in fear and greed. And one of the learnings I've had in the last few years is that everything we do should come from love, including every business decision. Everything, even if you have to lay people off, that can be done with love, or every other decision as well. And that has such greater positive impact, in the long run. Businesses built on love and care, which is what conscious businesses are far more powerful businesses, successful businesses, resilient businesses. And people will do extraordinary things for and in these companies. We've seen it with the illustrations of what happened in Whole Foods when there was a flood, for example, early on, or many other examples, what happened at Barry Wehmiller during the 2008 financial crisis. When they were led through those instances with love, they emerged stronger and more successful than they had been before. So you talked about celebrating and elevating capitalism, which is our broader purpose for the movement. And I think what you're also here to do is to celebrate and elevate Conscious Capitalism Inc., our nonprofit, right? And to celebrate the successes, yes, I think that's important. David Cooperrider has his appreciative inquiry methodology, and it starts by saying we have to appreciate what has worked, what we have done well. It's always easy to find fault and look at where we haven't, but yeah, there are a lot of things that we have done well. And then build on that, you've got a solid platform there, right? So we want to elevate Conscious Capitalism Inc. So tell us about some of the things that you're thinking as you have been doing a broad review of where we are and what's worked and what has.
Well, the good news is we have a lot of assets to build off of. We have a reputation and lots of books, the things that you've been doing, Raj, the things that we've been writing about, our podcast, etc. But I come back to the how do we continue to get this message out? How do we continue to make it relevant to businesses? Because as you and I deeply share, this is the right way to run a business. It's not only the right way, it's a better way. So we don't have to get the right wrong. It's just a better way to do business. So we need to continue to get that message out and make it relevant. And then again, when people come and get involved in the movement, we have to help them do this faster, better than they could do it on their own. So those are the two anchor points that I want to build our offers around. Now, to do that, what we need to do is we need to make sure that we are continuing to be the thought leaders in this space. So we need to continue to be on that cutting edge of how do you think about this? How do you articulate the value and the reason why you'd want to try to do this? So we need to be in that seat and take that to another level. We also need to build a how-to academy. So we're going to be building a how-to academy that will have a range of different offers, and under that we'll have an expert network that can help people figure out how to do this so that they can come in, assess where they are on the journey, and then we can help them understand what are the offerings, what are the tools, who are the people that can be most helpful to them on their journeys. We need to continue to have outstanding events. We have the CEO Summit. We are now coming back to having some large regional and national events every year. We need to continue to increase our ability to support those events across the country and internationally. We also need to take some particular topics. So one, as you know, that we've been talking about a lot is this idea of conscious capital. So we're looking to next year have a conscious capital day in New York with various private equity and investment banks supporting it to talk about what's this idea of conscious capital that's thinking longer term, that's looking at this kind of business model and saying this is a good way of doing things. And then in a second area that I want us to sort of delve into a little bit is the role of the board and the idea of having, again, conscious boards. What does that mean? So next year, I'm hoping that we'll also, with a few partners helping to sponsor that, have a conscious board discussion about what is the role of board. So this kind of event, this kind of programming is going to be incredibly important. And we have to make sure we also have a peer-to-peer approach where we create networking, because it's one thing to listen to the experts or those like you and I who've been involved with the movement for a long time. It's another thing to talk to your peers. It's another thing to connect with your peers and have your peers share some of the good things and some of the hard things they've had. And so how we increase our peer-to-peer networking and how we continue to evolve that will be sort of a fourth pillar. And then, we're going to be looking for more and more strategic partnerships. You've mentioned a number of organizations. There's a number of others out there that have over the years been fellow travelers. So how do we find ways to form strategic partners with some of those folks to, again, have a further reach and a greater reach? And then finally, we really have to have outstanding, strong chapters. You and I have both seen the power of some of the chapters that we have, and how do we continue to grow and support that chapter network so that we have more outstanding chapters, because the reach, just up in the Great Lakes Bay region, we were doing a back of the envelope calculation, and it was, if you looked at the CEOs that were up there and you asked how many lives do those people have under their care in their companies, and it was almost 40,000 lives. And then you say, well, they go out and they have families, and that's 120,000 people. And then they go out into their communities, and you start to see the ripple effect that we can have. So the stronger our chapters, the more of these businesses we can reach, the more lives we can impact, and the more we can play that role of making it relevant and accelerating the practice through some of these different capabilities that we're going to build over the next couple of years.
Well, talk to me a little more about the academy. What did you call it? The Conscious Capitalism Academy?
The Conscious Capitalism How-To Academy.
How-To Academy, yeah, right.
So for example, we're in discussions with Whole Foods about being able to license their learning and development platform. And we also have an opportunity to bring on board Jessica, who you may know, who helped develop parts of that. So how do we, make available those kind of tools to both our chapters and to our national members? You have some offerings that you have around conscious leadership. You and I have done an online 8-week course with the Growth Institute. So we have a whole series of these types of tools that we have available, but we haven't quite organized into a curriculum. And so one of the things that I'm going to ask Jessica to help us do is, help us develop a curriculum that goes from, hey, this is Conscious Capitalism 101, to, at the other end, you want to do a deep dive on a particular area. Well, we have some support for that, and we have an expert network of people who we can give you reference to, who are part of our community, are proven resources who are experts in these areas that we think could be very helpful to you as you think about that. So it's create a structure, create a flow, and then make sure that we have the right tools in there and the right way for people to connect to others that can help them on the journey. So that was one way in which we will help accelerate the practice.
And then I think we have to capture those success stories and write them up as cases and quotes
and make them available. So I'm having an interesting discussion with one of our board members who's just started to use AI to do exactly that. And we're going to start having a discussion with them about, how do we use an AI interface to say, hey, I'm really interested in purpose in the retail business. Can you give me some case studies? And then have that ability to pull out all of the videos, some of the articles, some case studies that could help you and do that. So we have an incredible number of assets after 17 years. And so I'm also hiring someone, Kate Adams, to come on board, who's going to also be working with us to sort of say, how do we make those assets that we have, again, structure them and make them easy to use? Where do we have gaps? How do we fill those gaps? And how do we continue to build the portfolio of case studies, articles, videos that we have that are easier to access so they can help you, the C-suite leaders that we're trying to appeal to, understand better, how have others done this? As you know, sometimes, Raj, I say that you and I are in the courage and confidence business, right? On the one hand, we have to help leaders have the courage to use that L word, to go to their hearts and sort of say, yes, this is something that's important. It feels like the right way to run a business, and it's in line with my values as a personal human being. But then we also have to have the confidence. We have to also understand, yes, you can do this. Others have done it. There are steps you can take. So part of what we're trying to do, both with our library of information and our thought leadership, is to help give you the courage. And then with the How To Academy, with our events and programming, with some of our networks, how do we help you have the confidence that this can be done and you can do it and you can go on this journey?
And I think one of the partnerships, you're familiar with what we're doing here at Technological de Monterey and the Conscious Enterprise Center. And I think that's a piece that can fit into that broader puzzle. Certainly because we're talking a lot about impacting today's leaders and their businesses, but future leaders are also very important in changing business education. I think tech is at the forefront in that. We have 200 professors now teaching conscious business here. We're part of full semester in-depth immersion. It's called minor. So students only take conscious business that semester. So they have 200 hours of classroom instruction and 200 hours of field work on applying these ideas, right? And now we're starting to also be part of other networks where faculty from other schools are also looking at the future of business education. And we are also about to start our programmatic research agenda. And I think all of this is synergistic with what CCI wants to do.
Completely.
Right? And one of the things we could look at as we go forward, we can ask companies that are already on this path, like, what are your biggest challenges? What are things that you need help with, right? Which research can maybe provide some guidance. And so that becomes, they're the ones who then identify what are the key research priorities for us to make sure that the research we do is relevant to practice, right? And then we get people, faculty members from here and elsewhere to actually do those research projects. So there's an interesting model there that was pioneered by the Marketing Science Institute in Boston years ago, 50 years ago, actually. And I think that can apply, because on the one hand, they have chief marketing officers who are members of major companies, and they every year put together a set of top research priorities based upon what they are facing in the world. And then they issue calls for proposals.
Well, I think you said three things there, Raj, that I fully embrace, some of which we're going to do short term, some of which we're going to do in phase 2. So let me begin with the part of the phase 2 is, you and I have both been involved down in tech with the Conscious Enterprise Center. I think it would be great if we had, in 5 years from now, we had 10 Conscious Enterprise Centers across the world. And we start looking at that as a model for how business schools can start to work in this direction. I was talking to a business school this week that said, hey, we would love to have a center of excellence around conscious capitalism. What might that look like? And
what business school is that? Which one is that?
That was up in the Great Lakes region. That was Saginaw State University. And so, they've got a family center, and they'd like to, with a very strong chapter. And again, it shows the synergy between very strong local businesses, a strong chapter, and then the largest university in that region stepping in and saying, how might we do something along this lines? So again, I think that, replicating and what we've done at CEC, the Conscious Enterprise Center at Tech, and, having Conscious Enterprise Centers as a network would be great. And as you and I know, there's work going on around business school curriculum over in Europe. And, there's a whole series of case studies that have been developed there. How do we get this out so that we can? So in my world, that's in the second phase, is how do we really fully embrace that? I think some other things that you brought up around the research and more importantly, the role that we can play that's unique is partnering with various groups like Nielsen IQ around conscious consumerism, around one other institute we're going to be talking to, which is a think tank, an independent think tank, about how we do a survey of conscious businesses. And what does that mean? What's the state of the conscious enterprise? So I think there are things like that where we will look for partnering opportunities to start, like you say, setting the agenda. What are they needing? What do we have? Where are the gaps? And how does that, again, feed into the academic world in terms of doing studies that help us to find ways to fill those gaps? And then finally, we're going to try to wrap this into a national membership model. So, we are conscious capitalism. So we are capitalists. And the question is, how do we have a sustainable business model for ourselves? So one of the ways we're going to do that is by offering national memberships. And as a part of being a national member of Conscious Capitalism, you will have access to the How To Academy. You will have access to special events. You will have access to special online programs. Like, for example, Raj, would some of our members love to have an hour-long dialogue with Raj Jasodia about the healing organization? So come on for an hour, offer some of our members the opportunity to be in small groups and get an hour of your time to do something like that. John Mackey's volunteered to do that. We have other luminaries who will help people get access to in an online way, but in a way where there's small groups coming together and having these dialogues. So we've got some peer-to-peer networking ideas that we're going to be experimenting with. We're going to have the How To Academy. We're going to have some exclusive events that we will invite people to. So these are things that will be part of the membership model so that over time we have also a viable way of maintaining the movement going forward. So we have to think of ourselves as an impact venture and have that kind of mentality that we're out to have an impact. So the final piece I'll add, and this will be part of the research agenda perhaps over time, but in the short term, we need to be able to start writing an impact report every year of like, what is the impact we're having? We need to have an annual report. Here's what we're doing. Here's the impact we're having on the world, and here's how we're evolving. And just like any business would, even though we're a not-for-profit, that's where we need to be going. We need to be demonstrating that the things we're doing make a difference. And that will also be part of what I'm going to make sure that we do every year. Starting next year, we'll have a 2025 impact report, and that will be an annual report that we'll put out.
Terrific. And, if going back to something you said earlier, which I had never thought about, the idea of having conscious enterprise centers, almost franchise in a way. I mean, we've done something here. I think we're relatively unique. There are other centers around, CSR or around, different elements, purpose, etc. But I think having other universities adopt some version of that would be really interesting. And then you've got that, that cluster thing that Michael Porter talked about years ago. Why do you get a cluster? You've got a university that specializes in that. You've got businesses, you've got support services, suppliers, etc. It all kind of come together. So in each region, we can think about creating that sort of triumvirate of exemplar good businesses that exemplify this already, a university that is teaching this, and
a strong chapter, and creating a place where the businesses, the business leaders, the community leaders can gather, being it anchored. Because I think that's one of the success factors that actually some of our better chapters have had. And I'm thinking again of our friends up in the Great Lakes Bay region, where, partnering with the family business, the Stevenson Family Business Center has been an important part of what they've done, so that they triangulate between community and business leaders, a strong chapter, and a business school that's really wanting to support them and wanting to evolve. Becomes a pretty interesting model for us to try to see how do we replicate that. And you have parts of that down in tech, in Monterrey, where you've got obviously the largest business school in Mexico at the center of that. But you've also got a very active community of family business owners, of very big, successful family businesses. And it's that intersection of those different components that I think help build a cluster of conscious capitalism.
Yeah, and I think the synergies are quite a few, because those universities have large alumni networks who can be activated and made aware of these things. Their students are always looking for internships. These companies can be sources of that. So there's a lot win-win, kind of thing.
A shout out to our San Diego chapter, which has just won a fairly large grant for setting up conscious capitalist internships for business school students. Great work. That's the kind of thing exactly where some foundations are saying, how do we help these young students find opportunities where they can do internships to, again, experience that business can be something different than it has. One of the challenges we have, Raj, is that, depending on what statistic you look to, but some statistics seem to indicate that up to half of young people under 30 have lost confidence in capitalism as a system. And we need to recognize that. I always like to tease them and say, well, okay, so what's the alternative? And, they hum and haw a little bit. However, the message is one that we need to be listening to, that they've lost confidence in the way that we are doing things and the way businesses operate today. We have such a powerful anecdote to that in terms of the way that we have seen business be a force for good, all the incredible benefits that you and I have seen over the years. They need to hear that story. They need to hear it. They need to experience it. And that would be the power of getting into the academic community and finding these clusters where we can bring all that power together.
Yeah, I think young people want to be inspired. I mean, they're idealistic, at that age, but they haven't heard a story of business that inspires them. It is all about shareholder value and profit. And then they've seen the downsides when it comes to inequality and climate change and all the other things, species extinction, etc. And so we know that we have a story of business that is inspiring, right? Business can be noble, business can be heroic, business can be beautiful when it is done with this mentality and this approach, and it can be highly successful. So I do think, that's a very important constituency for us, because over time, ultimately, that is what I think is going to make a difference. One of the other things I've heard you talk about is there are other entities out there that have many members, business leaders spread out around the world, like YPO and EO, and there's others as well. I think the Forum, there's another one, I'm trying to remember the name. No, Wistage, I think, that's the one, exactly. To what extent do you want to prioritize that if we can get them to, in a way, embrace these principles so that everything that they do now, they become, in a way, as ambassadors, for us?
Well, as you know, we have a number of people on our board who've been involved with the movement for a while who are, leaders within the YPO community. And that's certainly something that we're going to explore in the next 12 months. Begin with one group and see what the opportunity is there for us to partner with them, to have maybe something like conscious capitalism inside, the old Intel inside. What does conscious capitalism inside look like? Because these are the entrepreneurs, the family-run businesses that are going through generational shifts, whom this message really resonates strongly. So YPO is one, and the other is really trying to understand a lot more about the family business institutes that exist at many universities and in many communities. Because so often, what I'm struck by is, many of these family businesses are now into their third and fourth generation. And as the fourth generation comes in, they're wanting to ensure the stewardship of the business for the next generation. And they're open to thinking about business differently because they've lived with some of the consequences of the old model. And again, that's a market and an audience that's really ripe for this messaging. And we need to figure out better ways of getting in touch with them. And then finally, there's the whole employee ownership movement. We had a whole panel that we helped put together at our most recent CEO summit. It started with Pete Strabos, the head of KKR's private equity business, talking about the work they're doing with employee ownership. The work they're doing connected to employee ownership is empathetic leadership and how they're trying to bring that and those things together in some of their portfolio companies. And then we had a panel of CEOs who have gone down the employee ownership model, and some of them gone 100%, some of them gone different levels, but all looking at this opportunity to share the creation of wealth with the people in the business that are actually doing the work day to day. And I think that's another area that
Yeah.
we need to continue to explore and connect with that community, because they're already down that path a little bit about the importance of employees. And I think that our message of how these things integrate together to create a systemic approach to improving the business is going to resonate hugely. So those are our three areas that I'm hoping that we will do some exploring over the next 12 to 18 months about how we can and create peer-to-peer networks within those groups around the notion of conscious capitalism.
Well, Timothy, we have an audience of people who are deeply committed to this movement and these ideas. And do you have an ask of them? Are you looking for ideas? Are you looking for particular actions? Would you want to mobilize the people who listen to this podcast, and in what way?
Well, first of all, Karen Salmon, passed this baton. See, this is a relay baton to me at the CEO Summit, and I'm grabbing this baton and echoing some phrases that another speaker, we had Hubert Joly, who was the CEO at Best Buy and turned Best Buy around, is now a professor at Harvard Business School. He said his message at Best Buy when he went in was, "My name is Hubert, and I need your help." Well, I have the baton. My name is Timothy, and I need your help. It's so for our audience, whether you're involved in the chapters, we're going to try to, revitalize our chapter connection and our approach to our chapters. We'll want you to help us co-create what that looks like. And if you're not in a chapter, look for a local chapter or think about it. If you're a CEO, then certainly we will be hosting a series of events next year. Starting in February, we're going to have a series of one-day events, one on the East Coast, one in the Midwest, and one in California, to invite CEOs to come in small groups and start looking at our membership model. The one on the West Coast, for example, will be hosted by John Mackey at Love Life. And we've got another couple of names, well-known companies that we're finalizing those arrangements with. So I'll say, look for these opportunities to engage with us, come to some of these things, learn about membership and what the value of membership might be. And certainly, as we launch a series of regional and national events over the next 12 months, please look to attend those and opportunities to participate. Because we want to take your interest, we want to get you more engaged, and we want to build a relationship with you. And those are that's sort of the little spectrum that I want to be able to reach out to you and say, if you're interested, come and find out more. If you're really interested, come and get engaged with us in one of our events, and then look to how you can be in relationship with us and with others that are on this journey through membership and through chapters. So that's my sort of call to action for the next 12 months. And if you have any thoughts or ideas that, reactions to what Raj and I have been talking about, you can always send me an email at thenry@consciouscapitalism.org. That's thenry@consciouscapitalism, one word, .org. And my name is Timothy, and I need your help.
My name is Raj, and I want to thank you, Timothy, for all the work you've done to further this movement. At our various board meetings over the years and various retreats, you've been a key figure helping us plan the next stage of what we have done. And so I'm really grateful and appreciative of everything that you have done and of what you are going to do now in this role. And that we're all here to support that vision and expand that vision. So thank you again for your leadership in this area.
Well, Raj, what can I tell you? I value you as a friend. I value you as a colleague. I find you an inspiring speaker on conscious capitalism and a leader in the field. So I am just so blessed to have you in my life. And for that, I am grateful. And to have your support at this time is a wonderful thing. And I am incredibly appreciative of that. So thank you, Raj. And and thank you, our listeners. And if you enjoyed these ramblings of Raj and I today, please, on whatever channel you're listening to, feel free to hit the subscription button and or share it with your friends. If there's others that you know that are interested in the movement, then please share the podcast and go to consciouscapitalism.org to see more information about our sponsor, Conscious Capitalism. And if you so feel moved, please go over to Apple and iTunes and leave us a review. And thank you again for being our audience. And thank you to Conscious Capitalism for sponsoring this. And thank you to our Rainbow production friends who help produce this every week. Be well, and we'll talk to you again soon.